It's lovely to be here live on LinkedIn. And you know me, Philippa, and I just love having these conversations and meeting interesting people. And so Michael is joining me today. Hello, Michael.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Very formal. And I know you're not always like that. So Michael is he's got a brain the size of a planet, is all I'm going to say. 2 PhDs to his name, and so his fascination is with very small microorganisms and endurance events. There we go. In a nutshell, Michael.
Very much in a nutshell, I suppose. Yes, my background is infectious diseases and how they can be either treated or identified. And yeah, I sort of fit that work in between running marathons.
There you go, as you do. So infectious diseases, well, this is very topical at the moment, isn't it?
It is indeed. I think, infectious diseases span such a broad spectrum of things, from the pandemic as we see it today, the flu that most of us catch every year, bacterial infections, and if you're unfortunate, the parasitic infections that you might pick up from water, especially in the developing world.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about your journey and how you came to be where you are today, and maybe give us the abridged version.
Okay, in a nutshell, by my accent, you can obviously realize I'm not local, even though I live in Wales. I'm German, so I can sound like this if you want me to, but I won't do the generalization thing. I am the son of missionaries. I spent my life growing up in Africa.
Oh, wow.
I completed my PhD in South Africa, hence the South African twang. And I've been very fortunate to travel the globe from South America to having spent time in the US and in China, and finally settling here in the UK, where my better half worked for the NHS for many years.
Oh, okay.
Through that period, I have always looked at how one can control microorganisms and prevent them from causing disease.
Yeah. And I mean, that's sort of within us and outside of us as well, isn't it, I suppose?
Yeah, I think we hear quite a lot about what is now called the microbiome. People take probiotics all the time. You get probiotic yogurts, you get life cultures in your yogurt or in your drinks. And I think what most of us don't realize is that we have this huge number of bacteria in our gastrointestinal tract, which we need because they help us digest food. We have bacteria on our skin. Sometimes that bacteria is bad and it causes something like acne. But in a lot of cases, it's actually our first line of defense, which we don't realize.
Yeah. I mean, what did you say to me the other day, that the bacteria outnumber the human cells?
Well, yes. So numerically, you are more bacterium than you are human, although your human cells are a lot bigger than bacteria, and hence you see the bacteria.
Oh, well, yeah, that's because I suppose that makes sense, doesn't it now? So the volume is the thing that makes the...
Very much so, yes.
Okay. Well, you did touch there on the microbiome, and this is something that I am particularly interested, to understand how this contributes to our state of wellness. And there's lots of tests that we can pay for to look at, what the bacteria inside of us are doing, what they're comprised of. I mean, what's your take on those kinds of tests?
I suppose I cast my mind back to my first PhD, where before the term microbiome was even considered, I worked on the fact that, I'm going to digress just for a second because it fits into the microbiome, but I think a lot of people have heard that certain diets are very beneficial for you. The Mediterranean diet is always used as the sort of, that which you can strive for because it seems to really enhance your health and give you longevity. And I think the issue is around the sort of balance between the various food groups that you eat, and fiber is a major issue or part of that. And my work was actually on how the breakdown products of fiber, which are produced by the bacteria in your gut, can be used to treat cancer. And so to get to your question,
Yeah.
you know, every one of us, because of the way we've grown up, where we live, what we eat, we will have a different set of bacteria in our guts. But the groups of those bacteria are very similar in, I'm going to call, ethnic groups, which is really dependent very much on, again, diet and lifestyle. And so testing what's in your gut only makes sense if you're actually testing for the groups. The individual bacteria, obviously really exciting to us scientist types, but from how you can influence them and enhance your health, you need to just do that as very much at a macro level, because then you can enhance the good bacteria in your gut just by changing your diet.
So this is something that I come across quite a bit. People suggesting that concentrating either one particular part of a food into a capsule, something that you swallow, or even synthesizing a lot of different kinds of fruits and vegetables into a capsule that you can swallow. Do you have any thoughts around those kinds of things?
Well, I suppose there's very, I'm going to say I'm not a specialist in the field, even though I did a lot of work in that in the past. But the whole idea of what is called prebiotics, which is giving specific nutrients to the bacteria in your gut to get the good bacteria, your own definition of good bacteria, but those that are beneficial to you, to grow faster and more specific to the bacteria that aren't beneficial to you. And so concentrating the nutrients that are exclusively used by the beneficial bacteria is a good idea. And there are some especially sugars that can only be used by certain of your beneficial bacteria that then again would help you in terms of your health and well-being.
Okay. All right. That, I mean, I know this is slightly, I've caught you a bit off guard with this. I'm sorry.
Not at all. I mean, your title of the talk was, had garlic in the title.
Oh, it did.
So if we take garlic, now garlic contains a sugar called inulin.
Oh yeah.
A lot of products do, but inulin specifically is a sugar that is very beneficial to the beneficial bacteria in your gut. So concentrating inulin actually will make an impact. Whereas concentrating a lot of vitamins and other plant extracts may be beneficial to a point, but excuse the way I'm going to phrase this, it's also going to make very expensive urine.
Oh, yeah, I know. I have heard that said before. Yeah. So I think this is the thing, picking out the wheat from the chaff, really, for us, who don't have 2 PhDs to our name. It's really difficult to pick it out because people obviously have a vested interest in selling these things to us. And, but so, I really appreciate that you could tell me that inulin is a good thing. And do you know what? I did talk about garlic, and that was really in reference to the breath part of the work that you do. And so garlic, it really doesn't agree with me on any level. And so I'm maybe I will, if I could take it in a tablet, perhaps I will. Because, I was working as a physiotherapist and I was eating a lot of garlic. And then one day a patient said to me, he said, you really smell of garlic today. And I said, oh, I'm awful sorry, because we didn't wear masks back then in the 80s. And, I said, I'm awfully sorry. And he said, oh, it's all right. He said, you smell of garlic every day. He said, it's just worse today.
Well, interesting that you say that. I had a bunch of students say that to me many years ago, which sort of stopped me from eating garlic before I go into public places. I will admit that.
Yeah.
But I'm going to digress on garlic for a moment. I mean, garlic is probably one of the best known, I'm going to call it, medicinal plants that exists. It's been referenced in texts that are 4,000 years old. I mean, even the Mesopotamians had garlic in their I'm not even going to try that. Their book of medicine.
Okay.
The Egyptians have garlic cloves carved as hieroglyphs on the inside of pyramids. There has been vast amounts of research on garlic, and it is known to actually help in terms of heart disease. It is incredibly effective as an antibacterial.
Oh, yeah.
If you have nothing else in the house and you cut a garlic clove in half and wipe it over the wound, it's going to sting terribly.
Okay.
But there is a product in garlic which actually leads to the smell called allicin. Allicin is actually a well-known product. Now, allicin breaks down really quickly, so it won't last in your body for much more than about 15 seconds. But it is incredibly effective. And if you could really make a drug out of allicin, it is quite effective against a lot of different diseases in a test tube. The problem is, because it breaks down in the body so fast, it's never been converted into a drug. And the only reason I can talk about this, I researched that space for many years, trying to produce a drug to treat lung infections.
Right.
But the only word of advice I'm going to give, if you're going to concentrate allicin, it is as strong as bleach. You could literally bleach your hair with it, although I won't quite say what your neighbors might say about the smell.
Of your hair.
Yes, you will reek for a while, I would suggest.
So I mean, garlic, it is, like you say, it's an old wives' tale. It's been around for centuries, and just because it's a traditional wisdom doesn't mean that it doesn't work. Clearly,
no, there was some work done in Nottingham, I'm going to say 3 or 4 years ago, where someone found an old parchment of a battlefield concoction that was supposed to treat infections and wounds. And a group in Nottingham and a group actually in Swansea in Wales actually recreated that and showed how effective that was. So maybe old wives' tale and old wisdom, but actually really effective.
Yeah. I love all that natural kind of the idea. They put in manuka honey in wounds now, maggots.
And every one of you take manuka honey or medicinal honey that has really good clinical studies behind it. This is not just an old wives' tale. I mean, there's really good science behind that. And you can, certain parts of the NHS will actually will have that in their medicine cabinets. The maggot thing, in terms of cleaning wounds, there is probably nothing better to debride a wound than a maggot. I know it sounds disgusting, and a lot of people wouldn't think about it. Again, maybe a bit of a center of excellence here in South Wales, but there is a company in South Wales that actually grows maggots specifically for medicinal purposes. And there's a lot of places in the world that will use maggots specifically to debride wounds, especially burn wounds, which are so sensitive.
Right. Yeah, well, thank you for that. We did go a little bit off topic. And so I was particularly interested to talk with you today about breath analysis. And I put there the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that was kind of in reference to garlic, really. So I think we've covered that.
I'll stick to that just for a second, because I mean, when we first chatted a couple of days ago, we were talking about, why breath analysis? And your breath is a window on your physiology. And I use garlic as my example because you can have eaten garlic the day before yesterday, and as you pointed out from your patient, someone will pick it up in your breath. And there is no way that garlic ended up in your lungs. The only way it could have got there is obviously as a way of your body getting rid of that garlic, which obviously was picked up by your gut, went into your bloodstream, and from your bloodstream got carried to your lungs. And the reason I use that is that those volatile agents, so the things that you can smell, are often enough expelled through your lungs. And a lot of compounds in your body are expelled through your lungs way before they ever end up in your kidneys or elsewhere to be excreted. And so breath is a fantastic window on the body. And hence, most people can relate to the garlic smell, even if you've eaten garlic 48 hours ago. And I think that's, that really is the example of how breath is that window on the body.
Yeah. So the what you just said then was it ends up in the breath before it might be excreted through the kidneys or the bowel. So it can even prematurely, in advance of any of those kinds of investigations, it could pick up, particles. Is it particles? What are you looking for in breath?
I suppose we're looking for really small molecules that can actually be expelled from your lungs. So you're looking at things that effectively become a gas.
Right.
So bad breath. People who have advanced stages, or maybe not even such advanced stages of diabetes, have a sweet smelling breath. And that a part of that is obviously ketone, which you can smell. Another part of that is acetone. And so you can actually diagnose diabetes or early onset of diabetes by the changes in the amount of acetone and ketone in someone's breath. You don't need a blood test. You don't need to do anything else. That's a very simple way of monitoring that. And then you could monitor the progression by the increases of the ketones and the acetone in the breath.
So would that be there in the earlier stages, or is that more in the latter when things are getting... No.
I think obviously everything is quite person specific, but in our breath, you're going to find more than 1,000 different compounds, and that's just on the basis of the technology that we've developed. There's probably more. Our technology just doesn't pick them up, but so you breathe out these, call it 1,000 different compounds at varying levels. If you then have a change in your physiology, maybe you have early onset of diabetes, the ratio of those is going to change. As the ratio changes, you're able to monitor that. And if you know which part of that ratio is related to a specific disease, you can actually then diagnose that disease. And this is something we've been doing trying to perfect for the last, I'm going to say 5 years, even though the project started a lot earlier than that, to be able to do early identification of disease. And our primary target was actually lung cancer. And that was because one of the founders of our organization lost someone dear to him through lung cancer, which could possibly have been treated if it had been detected earlier.
Right.
So we've been looking at the simplest non-invasive way of being able to diagnose the disease. And nothing is simpler than what you do every day. You breathe in and out all the time.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's right. It's one of the outputs. So, we test all the others, don't we?
We do.
And I suppose with what you're trying to do, what we need to do to begin with is to get this representative of what is normal for people, the average or the normal, these normal values. And is that where you're mapping lots of normal people, or how would you do that?
So what we started a while ago, and we're not the only people working on this. I think a lot of people are realizing that breath is probably a way of diagnosing a lot of diseases in the future. And really what you need to do is to get as many people as you can find, literally to blow into a tube, and then start creating this really vast database of what is in, I'm going to call it healthy breath, because probably all of us have some form of ailment. We just don't realize we have it. If you get enough people, then you're going to actually be able to get an average across that. And not only do you have to do it with the right number of people, but you have to do it with across ethnicity. I mean, I grew up in Africa. I have a very different diet to my German family. And so, my breath picture is going to be very different to theirs, even though I'm German. So you will also need to bring ethnicity into that. A diet from an African will be different to someone from the Caribbean, will definitely be different from someone from the subcontinent or China. And I think getting a large enough database in terms of what the normal is, and will be is probably the the sort of holy grail of breath analysis.
Yeah.
Having said that, across all of those ethnic groups, when you start seeing disease, you will start seeing the same molecules move. And even though our general profile might be different, to the moment we start becoming diseased, there is a very close similarity between different ethnic groups, and you can start identifying disease, whether we're talking about a German or someone from Africa.
Right. That's interesting. So the variety among people is evident, but then the disease process is characteristic.
It is very much so.
Yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, albeit that we're ethnically different, we're all humans. So when we have a certain disease, the symptoms and how our body reacts is going to be very similar. It's not the same, but it will be very similar.
Yeah, there'll be parallels. So, what kind of diseases are we looking at spotting? Are we there with any of these diseases yet? Or
so our focus when I joined the organization was on lung cancer, and we still have a fair way to go with that. Just in order to be able to get a representative sample, you need a lot of patients, and the last thing I want to see is a lot of lung cancer patients. But we would need a large number in order to be able to get an early diagnosis. Yeah. But let's we're all sitting at home. We're having this discussion virtually. There's a reason for that, which is COVID, or should I say, SARS-CoV-2, to use the virus by its correct name. But we did a huge study a couple of years ago to try and differentiate between lung infections that are caused by viruses, like the flu, and lung infections that are caused by bacteria. I don't know, Pseudomonas, Streptococcus. The one is treated with chicken soup, and the other one is treated with an antibiotic. And considering the challenges we have with lack of functional antibiotics, being able to make those differentiations is really important.
Oh, yeah.
However, having this large sample of being able to differentiate between viral and bacterial lung infection, when COVID came along, it was relatively simple for us to switch our research to say, right, can we detect COVID? And let me not jinx this, so touch wood, but we can. We can literally detect early onset of the disease and differentiate between someone who has and someone who does not have COVID from a single breath. So it has advanced to that point. And again, I'm not going to jinx this, but with all of the studies that we've had, and we've tested over 1,000 patients now, and always our patients always tested with PCR, with the gold standard for testing, and then with a breath test. And if all goes well, there will be a functional breath test, single blow through a pipe, available in the market by July.
Wow.
So let me not jinx this, so touch wood.
We'll touch anything that's wooden. Oh gosh. And you were telling me about the driver obviously is this COVID has been, the pandemic has driven that development, hasn't it?
It very much it has. I think breath analysis has been talked about for years. And let's be fair, I think most of us know someone or have seen on TV, the number one breath analysis, which is the search for alcohol while you're driving. But that's a very simple, I'm going to call it very simple. It's not. It's technically actually quite difficult, but it's a very simple test looking for a single thing, which is alcohol or ethanol. In our case, we're trying to work out a picture of from 1,000 different compounds, narrow it down to, we now know it's 6 different compounds that are particular to COVID, and then say, based on the changes in the ratios of those 6, you either have or you haven't. The great thing is, though, the opportunity that this brings with it is to get a recognition that using breath for diagnosis of disease is a very real opportunity.
Right, yeah. So that then drives the agenda in its broadest sense.
It does, and from our perspective, COVID is a fantastic opportunity. Sorry, that sounds all completely wrong.
It does. I understand what you mean.
But to showcase the opportunity that breath analysis brings with it, and we're talking again, it's non-invasive. Most people can give a breath unless obviously they have some sort of impairment with their lungs that we could use, and we're not the only people who think like this. There was the future think guru of one of the globe's biggest data mining companies. Most of us are probably using their technology as we speak. Said he sees a future where you can breathe at your bathroom mirror in the morning, and it will tell you if you need to take another vitamin tablet. I paraphrase him badly, but the point that he was making was that that technology needs to develop, that something as simple as a breath in the morning will be able to tell you whether or not you're coming down with a disease, or whether or not you have some sort of nutritional deficiency, which is also reflective in your breath, that you can then act on. Maybe not tomorrow, but it's hopefully something I'll still see in my lifetime.
Yeah, I mean, I love the idea that we're being proactive and working towards preventative medicine. We know that the shifts occur way in advance of symptoms, for the most part, developing. And so to catch things early, to intervene early, we need to be testing early. And what could be simpler, like you say, a device that you can blow into that will give you a readout. Am I good to go? And carry on, or is there a peak there that shouldn't be there, and then we can intervene, because the cost of managing these a lot of these diseases is just prohibitive. And if only we could shift in this, towards prevention, and that would be how I would like to think.
I think a lot of us would like to see prevention rather than cure. It will have such an amazing impact on, firstly, the patient who doesn't progress to that point, the impact on our extremely stretched healthcare system, that and then, as you already mentioned, the cost of treatment is astronomical. And it's going to take quite a lot, though. I think there's the opportunity in terms of helping the patient, and I think a lot of doctors and physicians, even yourself, as a paramedical, you're very pro this. Now you have to convince the people who are going to pay for the process that they should be paying towards a simple diagnostic test to prevent, rather than having to pay for the cure, whatever that cure is.
Yeah, and I mean, I talked to you a little bit about the fact that being a perimenopausal was a challenging time for me, and so I asked if hormones was something that you could test. Hormone levels was something that you could test, specifically around the female hormones, and you said that was something that could be possible.
Yeah, it is. I mean, I'm not quite sure to what extent hormones are. It's not something I have looked at, but I do know that there is a certain amount of expulsion of hormones in the breath. A lot of theories about why and how. But if you're looking for a very specific molecule, very much like looking for alcohol with a breathalyzer, it makes the test really simple, because we're not looking for a disease state. We're looking for one thing. And so that could be done very simply. Whereas, if you're trying to look at some sort of syndrome around that, obviously not as simple, because you need enough patients in order to do that. Whereas if we're looking for estrogen and something else, that's two peaks on our in the analysis, and that becomes again simple. But I suppose for us as the developers of the technology, it is actually simple.
Oh, well, I like the sound of simple. So we talked, a little bit about COVID, obviously, and the breath, and then we were talking about, where could this technology take us? Because obviously diagnosis means that we need to get treatment, or we need to isolate, or whatever. But what we're all so desperate to do now is go on holiday. So
you and me both, yeah.
So where does this technology, take us, perhaps, if we're thinking about opening the world back up again?
I think you always think of any sort of device that can diagnose disease as something that gets used in a hospital. I mean, that's, but before the pandemic, I think most people wouldn't have known what an in vitro diagnostic was, or ever heard the term PCR. Now it's something that's done before you can climb on a plane. People insist that you have had a test of sorts, so that you are free to travel, because in the last 48 hours you have not been infected. Now, opening up the world, is going to require a lot of different things happening together. Vaccination is one. To get enough people vaccinated that we start, containing the spread of the virus. But that's not just necessary here in the UK. That requires global action. And whilst we here are going to be, hopefully, if one can believe the hype, everybody over the age of whatever the current age is, will be vaccinated by the end of May, is fantastic. But if you want to go to, I don't know, the Seychelles, my family's home in South Africa, the vaccination isn't going to be there yet, and hence, there is a need to test. Now, if you can test someone on the basis of blowing into a tube, and getting a result within 8 minutes of whether or not you are positive or negative, that's the time it takes for our analysis to happen right now. You could literally, I don't know, park your car at the airport, blow into the tube before you leave the car park. By the time you get to the door at the airport, the system has sent a QR code, which we're all so familiar because we use them all the time to scan with our phone, to your phone, which allows you to get through the door at the airport and go to check-in. Now, there's various versions of this QR code that's being developed across the globe already to open up the world. But if you could be tested, no blood, no one pushing a stick up your nose. Sorry, I have this mental block with that one. But all you have to do is blow into a tube, and literally within the time it takes you to walk a couple of 100 yards, you will know whether you're positive or negative. The impact that will have on, obviously travel. Could you imagine being able to open up, sporting events again, people being able to go watch their favorite or local football team, opening up, all of these venues that have been closed because bringing people into close proximity, increases the risk of transmission. So the opportunity is enormous. And I don't believe our technology is the only one that's going to help do this. It is one of the various ways that it can be done. We just believe that with you're not taking a blood sample, you don't have to have medical waste issues in terms of disposing of it. It's a disposable tube that once you've blown into it, could be recycled. It has the opportunity of opening up the world.
Yeah, I think this sounds really encouraging, because I'm trying to desperately work out how on earth travel is going to be possible. Without this idea of having to isolate at both ends before you set off or go anywhere, or get anywhere. So, which from the point of view of having 4 or 5 weeks holiday a year allocated to you, it just doesn't work, does it?
It doesn't, because you're going to lose. You've got to self-isolate on this side, have your test done, self-isolate depending on where you're going for anything up to 14 days on the other side.
I suppose you wouldn't want.
Days left.
I'm just thinking, you wouldn't want to get to the airport with your holiday books and find that You couldn't get in the door.
No, but I think, I mean, the whole idea of pre-travel testing actually is, you should be tested about 48 hours in advance.
Okay.
But, if you could, discussions we're having at the moment, if you could have these devices in community settings where you get a passport, whatever this thing is going to be called, and I know that there's a lot of people who feel that having this sort of passport is going to be a challenge in terms of data privacy and a lot of issues like that. And could this now be shared with governments? And I know there's a lot of issues around this, but if you could have a QR code that's just sent to your phone to say, I've been tested on this machine in this location at this date, and for the next 48 hours, you can go to places. If you have a negative test at that point, then unless someone has infected you in the last 48 hours, you should be able to get to the airport then, have your second test done. Because in a lot of cases, people require 2 tests in 72 hours apart before they let you on a plane anyway. So if you can do that, with a simple, community type test and then blowing into the tube at the airport, then that will prevent you driving all the way to Heathrow and going,
let me in. I mean, this is very kind of familiar to me, because when I was a younger physio working with respiratory problems, we were teaching asthmatics how to administer the medications. We were doing peak flow tests, and there was always a disposable cardboard tube involved. So I'm kind of familiar with the notion of the disposable cardboard tube that would make that something that different people could then utilize. So I like the idea. I definitely like the idea, and I any non-invasive is the thing that you described. For people, no blood required, no bodily fluids, quick by the sounds of it. Automated to a large degree, and so this takes away the need for people to be standing around in car parks with tents and plastic screens and all of this.
Well, I mean, for your community type setting, you might have the device in such a way that you blow into the device is on the other side of the screen. I mean, there's many ways to get around these logistics. And interestingly enough, we're talking about something that in a lot of countries in the world is actually quite normal. So, for example, if you go for a blood test in China, or you have a vaccination in China, depending on where you are, the actual technician who's taking the sample is on the other side of a screen already. And your arm just goes underneath the screen. So there are countries that have this in terms of infection control and protection of staff in place already. So this is not, we're not suggesting something new. It just needs some broader rollout.
Oh well, this is good to know, because we do tend to live in a bubble, don't we, if we're not careful, not realizing these things. So you're quite right, and they were definitely ahead of us there with the masks, weren't they? So but you did
to be fair, for a different reason. We're all used to wearing masks.
So the adjustment has not been quite so marked. Anyway, you did mention there onto the vaccines. Self-administration of vaccines is something that we're going to talk a little bit about now, and I know this is another passion project of yours.
I do far too many things at the same time.
It's fine.
So I think the people are used to self-administering drugs. Let's be fair. If any pill that you're given, once you go home, there's no healthcare professional involved anymore. And the healthcare professional can only hope you're going to take it in the sequence and in the time frame that you're supposed to. But let's also be fair that people who have, who carry EpiPens, or let's go back to diabetes, people who have to inject themselves daily with insulin, if they aren't fortunate enough to have an automatic insulin dispenser, are used to injecting themselves with the drug. So we're not asking the population to do something that is different. What we're suggesting is what if you could vaccinate yourself at home? Currently, you were talking about queues. I mean, the queues that you see on the telly and in the papers of people going around the block to get into their local vaccination center in the pouring rain and the snow and whatever else might be there, just because there is this desire to allow us to open up the world. Imagine that you could do that in the comfort of your own armchair. With or without, a healthcare professional on the other side of your phone, saying to you, right, now this is what, Michael, this is what you have to do. And we're not suggesting that you get a needle and syringe into your home. So something that we've been developing is called a microneedle, which is really a needle that is less than 1 millimeter in length that you would coat with the vaccine. There is a company in the United States that's developed actually where the needle is the vaccine, and you push that needle into your skin, and you don't need to draw blood. You just need to get deep enough to get to your immune system, and your immune system is less than 1 millimeter underneath your skin. It's not far away. And please don't do this at home, but next time you scratch yourself, just look at what happens. Immediately around that scratch, everything's going to go red. It's going to become inflamed. And that is because your immune system is trying to ensure that it's, to prevent anything from getting into that scratch. Now, that means, and that can just be a very light scratch. It doesn't actually have to be one that bleeds profusely.
No.
So think of that and keep that in the back of your mind. So now if you could reproduce that with a device, that pulls the immune system to that point, and then your normal immune response happens, you can do a number of things. You don't need a needle and syringe. That takes all of that out. You don't need sharps disposal. Again, we're talking about medical waste. You, in a lot of cases, do not need this cold chain. Let's talk about some of these vaccines that need to be stored at minus 70 degrees. One of the vaccines that's currently being developed for this type, it's not for COVID, it's for another disease, can withstand 40 degrees in heat, in a dry form. So the opportunity is vast. Now we're talking about, if this goes according to plan, and I'm hoping you can see that. I tried to clean it a little bit. So this is a microneedle patch or a microarray patch, depending on who you're talking to. What you're seeing in that plastic is actually far too many microneedles needed to vaccinate yourself. Actually, what you need is a patch that is, I'm going to say, less than 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter. I mean, we're talking not even half a postage stamp. The only reason I have this one is because that's my experimental size. And it's great because I can hold it up to a camera and show people.
So it's a plastic stick-on patch. It doesn't stick. Do you stick it?
The one thing I would suggest is forearm. In most cases, your forearm is. Where's my camera? Is the thinnest skin that you have. And in most cases, I appreciate me, excluding me too. It's the place where you have the least body hair. And the reason that you need that is if you're talking about a needle that is less than 1 millimeter in length, a lot of hair is going to prevent you from getting deep enough. So you would get this attached to a device which will, I don't know, probably look like a little dome that's going to allow you to apply enough pressure just to get those needles across the entire surface of that patch into your skin.
Right.
And then you take the applicator off, you put a plaster over it. It needs to be there for about 5 minutes. It's the time that it takes the vaccine to dissolve off those microneedles. And you have vaccinated yourself.
So this is something that has broad applications. And you did mention about, being raised in South Africa and seeing deprivation and people having diseases that, wholly preventable, if only they had access to clean water.
So, I think that's a bit of a passion of mine. So vaccine preventable diseases is a major issue, and it's a major issue across the globe. I know that we always see probably the developing world that requires vaccination. but quite, some of the biggest outbreaks of things like chickenpox, which is vaccine preventable. Okay, this time maybe Wales is not the right place to be in, but one of the biggest outbreaks in the Western world in the past couple of years was in Wales.
Oh yes, that's right.
And so being able to vaccinate simply without pain, you're talking about a thing that's less than a millimeter in length. You might feel a prick, but you're not going. It's not a needle stick. It's not someone who's going to be pushing something into your, into a muscle. So a really simple approach. So whether or not this is something that you can do in your home, or whether or not this is something that during vaccination programs, you can have someone who does not have to be a fully qualified doctor or nurse, but in a lot of cases, the health workers in the developed world, are trained, but they're neither a doctor or a nurse. They just effectively adjunct to a very stretched healthcare system. But if you know that all you have to do is push that down on your skin, keep it there for 5 minutes with a plaster, you could potentially vaccinate a lot of people very quickly. Now, I know there's been arguments about people vaccinating themselves, or because of the potential reactions to the vaccine. Hold on, we all take drugs, and we might all have reactions to those drugs too. I'm not saying there's no risk involved, but I'm also very cognizant of the fact that that risk can be mitigated. And if you do believe that you might have an allergic response, rather go to your doctor. But, we all complain. I know lots of people I know. Let me not generalize and say we all do. People do complain about the Royal Mail. But let's be fair. If we wanted to roll out a vaccination program that is going to be done in the home, you could give, you could reach probably every household within reason in the UK within a week, if you posted the correct number of vaccines to that household. I mean, that for me is the end goal out there somewhere. But that is an opportunity that not only us, but our American competitors are seeing as vaccine preventable diseases. Could you vaccinate yourself for COVID? Could you vaccinate yourself against the flu? Rather than having to go to your GP. And again, in all cases, the thought is twofold. One, how can you make it easier for the patient? We're talking about prevention. The vaccine is about preventing disease rather than treating it. How can you release pressure on our overstretched healthcare systems? Or if you're in the developing world, how can you help people to vaccinate? Or get through a large vaccination program with minimal hassle, with vaccines that are heat stable. A lot of the developed world, unfortunately, is in that space where it's incredibly hot. So, a vaccine that has to be stored at -70 is never going to work.
No.
There is so much opportunity there, and we're hopefully, maybe 2 years away from a full clinical trial. Although I will say that again, we're a little bit behind the curve on this one here in the UK. There is going to be a major trial for the measles using a different type of microneedle from next year. I think our approach is, though, these tiny little patches. If you're talking about making a vaccine, of any of the vaccine preventable diseases, you need to make 50 million of those patches. That's a fair number of doses that you need to be able to create. And so what we have really perfected is, how do you make these, for the same price as a needle and syringe? And that is something which I can say our competition hasn't done yet. They make a great microneedle, don't misunderstand me, but to make lots of them at a cost that makes sense is something that still escapes most people, and is something we've perfected. And again, it's a technology developed here in the UK, which hopefully will be manufactured here in the UK in the coming years.
Well, that sounds very exciting, and I think the vaccination program. Yes, we've mobilised a massive effort, but at what cost? I mean, somebody's had to sacrifice their job that they're currently doing to go off and do this vaccination program. And so, and I think, I mean, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't know that we've seen the last of this need for vaccinations once we've had two. So if this is going to be a feature moving forwards, then we need to be able to have something that is not so labor intensive or expertise intensive even.
Again, I'm not a COVID specialist, but if you consider every year you can have yourself vaccinated against the flu, and I think at least for COVID, we're probably going to see the need for another round of vaccinations. Just looking at the data, the development of the vaccines has been absolutely amazing, but we haven't had a single person treated for longer than a year yet, so we don't know whether or not they're going to need another vaccination. And I think just the skeptic scientist, which is what I'm supposed to be, says that I expect we're going to need a third vaccination. Which means that by the time we get to the end of May, everyone will have had one dose. Then you have to all get a second dose, and then maybe a third dose. And we did some just simple mental arithmetic. I mean, if you were to try and vaccinate a person every minute, it just in the UK, and we're talking 66 million people, it would take an army. I mean, literally, we are using the army at the moment, but it would take about 30,000 people, working 24/7, 3 months to vaccinate everybody, and then you got to do it again and again. So having an opportunity that allows, even if it's not going to be done in the home because of the potential risks associated with that, being able to walk down a queue of people to say, right, stick this on your arm, I'll hear the click that the applicator has worked, put the plaster on next. Not having the issues of medical waste and having to pull something out of a syringe where you may or may not have dose questions. It can only improve what we have today.
Absolutely. I can see that. I love the idea of gazing into the future. I've never been very good at it in the past, so I'm grateful to have you to shine a light on just what might be possible for us in the future. And this self-administration of vaccines, not for us, for COVID, for the third world, for easily preventable diseases, it seems like a no-brainer, really, to be honest.
We think so, yeah.
Good. Oh, well, we agree. So this is good. And so it only remains for me to say thank you so very much for giving your time today. And
thank you for having me and allowing me to expand on my favorite topics.
Yeah, well, I love that. We're talking about what we love. We can't get enough of that, can we? So the video will be available on the YouTube channel for people who didn't get the opportunity to check it out live, and we can point our people towards it. So thank you again. Have a fabulous rest of your day, Michael. I really am so very grateful. Thank you so much for your time.
Oh, Philippa, thank you ever so much for having me.
Thank you. Take care now.
Bye-bye.
Bye.